Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Old Sexperts. I'm Sean McGill, joined by my other host, Sharon Potter. Today, we're going to talk with you about romantic feelings and how to support the staff in processing these feelings in a positive way.
When we think about the relationships that people have, people that we support, and the people that support them, the relationships that pop up between them, and sometimes they're romantic, and people get all in a tizzy about it. Why wouldn't they be romantic? I mean, there's someone, like you or me and a million other people who care deeply about the people that we're working with. We help them to have a good, full life. And I don't understand why anybody's surprised when there's a romantic connection. But how you handle that is what is the issue. And we don't, again, we've talked about it a million times, that we don't do enough education around relationships and in boundaries and what is a friend and what's a boyfriend, what's a girlfriend, what do you do with each of these people, what do you say verbally, what do you call them, do you know their name or their middle name, or do you know their siblings or where they live, and do you hug them or touch them or you kiss them? I mean, all those things, you do all those things with different people. And how do you learn that? Well, you learn it because we should be teaching it. And whether we're doing like role playing or whatever. But I think the boundaries get very blurred. And the worst thing you can do to someone is say, I mean, I get so sick of saying the word inappropriate, but that's the word I hear all the time. That's inappropriate. Could you be my girlfriend? No, that's inappropriate. That's one way, but the other way is, well, gee, thanks. I'm flattered that you said that. That's really nice of you. But I'm married or I have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. But also, I work with you and I care about you, and I don't want to take advantage of that. And there are lots of people out there, and maybe let's find a group somewhere that you can meet more people and do make more of an effort to broaden the scope of what people are experiencing in their lives.
Because we're there so much and we're such a part of people's lives, they develop friendship feelings for us too. A lot of people will say to me, Sean, you're my friend.
Yeah.
I've had individuals say, oh, I think you're really cute too. And
Yeah.
that's sweet, that's kind, but I'm paid to be in your life. So I can't be your friend. And
Yep.
I certainly can't be your boyfriend or whatever because I'm paid. As long as someone is getting a paycheck to be in your life, they can't be either one of those things. We can be friendly with each other. We can have a
Yep.
great time together, but we
Yep.
can't, we can't be more than that.
And we do see it happen. I mean, we both know there are people who are in the system that are doing very, very well. And there are staff, direct support staff, that they maybe could really seriously be attracted to each other. And under different circumstances, it might be a relationship. And every once in a while, we know people that have crossed the line, and just does so much damage all around. It does so much damage. One of the other things I think about is I've talked to people about the difference in fantasy and reality. What they think in their heads sometimes, and then what's real. And I always think about a young man. There was a young staff woman, and she was really upset because the one of the men that was living in this group home was like crazy in love with her. And he knew she was married, but he would say, you can get a divorce, I love you. I mean, it was just it was. And he tried to like stroke her shoulder, and she was really getting pretty uncomfortable. So I went in and I spent quite a bit of time with this gentleman. He was an absolute delight. He had Down syndrome, and he was one of my, I'm not say one of my favorite people, but he was an absolute joy. And I got talking to him about all of this. And then I said, what's the difference in fantasy and reality? As far as, we'll call her Betty. With Betty, I know she's married and she's happy. And so that's not going to work. But why in your head, you see it a different way. So what's the difference in reality and fantasy? And he thought a minute and he said, I like Penn State football. The fantasy would be that I'm a quarterback. The reality is I'm a fan.
Good one.
Was a really good one. And I said, so what about Betsy? What's the fantasy? And he said, the fantasy is that I love her. I want to marry her. I want to live with her, like forever, the rest of my life. And the reality is that I do love her, but she doesn't feel the same way. And that was the truth, but he was so delightful. And I felt bad because I mean, he really loved Betty.
Well, what a great approach. And, we have used that where we try to look at a problem or a situation and try to break it down into one of two categories. And that way, the person can then sort of problem solve themselves. So, looking at what is reality and what is fantasy, because don't we all have reality and fantasy at times? And I
Oh,
try to bring it
absolutely.
back to what's normal, what's typical for all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
I love Jane Fonda. I have loved Jane Fonda since I can remember. I would marry Jane Fonda today if she would marry me, right?
I love Jane Fonda too.
Probably not for the same reasons.
No, probably not.
So it's a combination of things. But
No, yeah.
reality is there's no way Jane Fonda would have a second look at me. The fantasy is, I'm going to marry her before she dies because I just think she's wonderful.
I had another situation once that was very sweet. I thought it was a gentleman that was moving into a group home, but he had a history behind him of crossing the line with staff and touching people and saying things that weren't appropriate, whatever. So they asked me to come in and meet with him just to talk to him about some of this stuff. So I did. I spent a couple hours with him, and he was quite articulate and a very interesting guy. I said, "Do you have any more questions?" And he said, "Yeah, only one." And I said, "What?" And he said, "This was a really good conversation, and I really get all this. I understand all of it, but it would be wrong for me to kiss you, right?" I said, "Right, but tell me why. Tell me why it's." And then, of course, he said, because you're here and you're doing this for me, and then you're going to leave, and but it was because I cared about what happened to him, and we talked about intimate things, and that doesn't happen often. I thought that was a nice way to end that. It wouldn't be right, right? Right.
At least he asked, though, too.
At least he did. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much comes from not having other opportunities. The people in front of that are they're closest to are not available to them for personal relationships, interpersonals, or sexual, or even, well, I mean, friends. I mean, I've done things, gone to lunch when I moved from California. I had lunch with the woman I was working with because I wanted to say goodbye to her and took her out to lunch, and it was lovely. That's different. That's different, and we need to help people more, and we don't. I mean, some agencies do a really good job of supporting people who have an interest in somebody else. They invite them to dinner and work with them until they get to the point where the couple may be saying, "We want some alone time." And then you've got to be sure about they have the ability to give sexual consent and birth control and all of that. And you want to be all the time you're supporting them along the road. You also have to be protecting them and keeping that, not protecting, but keeping them safe. There's not enough of that. There are many more people capable of having relationships than are actually having them.
And I think we do have to sort of play a yenta at times too, in this matchmaker where, and we do that in our everyday lives of our own too. People set us up, they say, I have
That's
this
true.
person I think would be a good match, like blah, 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 blah. But I'm finding myself moving towards that direction too with a lot of people. In fact, I'm going to be talking with a mother later this evening about the idea of setting her daughter up with someone that else that I know because they're both lonely. They both want to date. They can't seem to find anyone who would be a decent match. So it's helping to sort of facilitate that, weave that a little bit to produce the opportunity. And once the
Yeah.
opportunity is produced, like you said, just kind of monitoring how they're both handling that. How are they both feeling? Even working with people, if you're not feeling this, if it doesn't feel right for you, how do you end it and move on? Like it's okay. But one, we have to produce the opportunities, and two, we have to keep supporting people to sort of navigate all those feelings and situations too.
And when I lived in California, I lived out there for a few years, and I was doing some work for the regional center of the East Bay. And I would do once a month, I would do a class on sexuality and relationships and all of the things that we talk about all the time. But after the class, they put the music on and brought snacks out and people danced and just had a great time, and they could ask, while I was there, they could ask me anything. Sometimes two people would come up together and say, "We like each other, but we live in different group homes. And how do we do this? And but and they were actually coming from different places. They weren't all coming from the same place. They were living in different areas. And So they wouldn't have known each other if they didn't come to that group. And it was great. It was really great. And when you think about a group home, or well, I'm thinking sometimes a residential program, but staff have so much to do that's sometimes that's the last thing they're thinking about is how to, how can I make more work for myself by bringing more people in and having a social aspect to all of this. And some agencies, as we both know, do a pretty good job, but some do nothing at all. I mean, they just don't.
And with the situation with staffing, we keep talking about the staffing crisis, and we keep hearing about increasing the money, and we're seeing, the rates increasing. I don't think it's about money. I think it's about how we're supporting the staff. And I did a training for the HICU yesterday on the impact of trauma and talking about how we need to support the staff through things too. And I addressed, I've long said the staffing crisis is not about money. You can throw all kinds of money at people and they're still A, not willing to do it, or B, they're burning out at a ridiculous rate. It's about that support. And this podcast, we committed to try to give people information as a support to them,
Yes.
to help them sort of persevere, because people are out there in the trenches, but they feel like they're on an island and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, boy, that's probably maybe the core of when you talk about this topic. I mean, people don't, they're afraid to encourage someone because they might get hurt or they might hurt someone else. But, the nitty gritty education that needs to be done and opportunities to practice, I mean, that's just more work for people that are already exhausted. So I don't know what the solution is, but I mean, there's so many good, wonderful people working in the system that care deeply. And I mean, I'm thinking about one woman it was a person, it was a group home, and it was a man who had a history of sexual abuse, sexually abusing other people. And she was a little off kilter when I would visit and talk to the staff and talk to this gentleman. So I just spent a little time with her once, and I said, I'm picking up something here that you're not comfortable. And she said, every time I look at him, I could just throw up. And I was like, what? Well, she had a history of abuse and someone in her family was abused. And that's all she could see. She couldn't see the human being. She could just see the abuser.
Yeah.
And what I said was, this is not working for you or for this gentleman. You're harming yourself every time you're here and you feel that way, and there's no way that you can be supportive to him. So you find it, you've got to find another place, or talk to somebody and try to get past some of this stuff, because this guy's doing his best, and he could have a really good day, and he could walk past you and you're going to slit your eyes at him, and boom, it's whatever goodness was there is going to be gone. We all have our baggage that we're dragging around and our histories, and we have to be able to look at that and set it aside and help people.
Romantic feelings, when we think about romantic feelings, this issue comes up all the time. It comes up between teachers and students. It comes up
Yeah.
between clergymen and congregation members. It's happening all around us. So working in residential services or direct supports or whatever, working with people with disabilities, we're not exempt from this either. And we have to know how to navigate these waters, because people are getting hurt. They are getting
Absolutely.
taken advantage of by staff. And shame on us if we're not doing more to address it. And I think having those clear boundaries and being very respectfully honest with the people that we support about what's expected is okay. But I think it's important because it's teaching them safety in other areas of their lives too.
Most agencies, or many, are not doing basic sex education. They're just not. And when you think about people who are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are in the system, did they get sex education in school? They're still not. I mean, some of them are not. And what was it? Was it just plumbing, or was it more about the real world? Who's what in your life, and what do you do with them? How do you feel about them? And sometimes there's somebody you just don't want to be around you. Like, I mean, that's a whole other thing, or just make you uncomfortable, and know that, once you can, if the hair on the back of your neck stands up, then pay attention.
So many times about a reform of the system. when looking at abuse prevention and safety, the oxymoron. And I talked about this in my training yesterday. And I know that I tick people off by saying this. It's an oxymoron to say that providers can investigate their own incidents too.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's that, but also we do criminal background checks. We're looking for things like felonies and this and that. But you can have a romantic relationship with your client, even though I hate that word,
I
and
do too. Yeah.
not get charged or convicted of anything, and then move on and keep doing it too. So if I think there has
Yeah.
to be a way to flag people in the system,
Yeah.
our system, because
Yeah.
most don't get caught, but they are investigated and through these internal investigations, and it's founded, but it's not a criminal charge.
Yeah. And the thing that I see so often, it's probably one of three things that make me just wild, is the two people are found together in doing something sexual and has to be reported, and it gets reported and then has to be investigated, and it's usually done internally. And what you end up having is a victim and an offender, and they're not either one. They're just two people trying to figure it out. And the way the questions are asked, one person might ask, did you want to do this? Was this something that you wanted to do, or did the person convince you? I mean, the way the questions happen, and it ends up that that person's a victim, and they're not. It's a fine line to encourage and support and help people have a full life, and to help people to be safe. It's a fine line, but if you don't walk it, then that's where all the trouble happens. That's where the problems happen if you don't do that. And not enough people are doing it. Yeah, I worry about that all the time. I really do.
But there are options. I talk to people about regular meetup groups. It doesn't have to be a disabled specific group or activity. If you like nature and you like hiking, join a meetup group and interact with other people. It doesn't necessarily mean you're joining that group in the hopes that you're going to form romantic feelings and
Yeah,
relationships with people. It's to form relationships, because those relationships lead to connections with other people too. And
exactly.
then natural opportunity can present. But there are disability specific apps and programs. Special Bridges is one. Hiki is an app, a dating apps and friendship app for people with autism. And it's free to use. So you have to know the nuances and the dangers and the safety rules with, using the internet and some of these social applications. But you can find connections with people. And let's face it, these days, people are using the internet to find connections too. So,
Yeah. It's interesting. That I've done a lot of work in the LGBTQI endless letters community. But 32 years ago, I started a support group in Harrisburg. It was one of the best. I always say it's the second best thing I ever did, rather than second to marrying Tom and blending our family of six little kids. But it was so interesting because, well, first of all, it was not unusual to have a kid who had been rejected by their community and their family and harassed, and to fall in love with one of the facilitators, because they were safe, and we got that. But we dealt with that, and we all had that experience. But the other thing was, because I worked in the world, people with disabilities, 1 in 10, no matter where you are. I mean, there are people that are LGBTQ in the people with disabilities community. I mean, of course there are. So, and that's just another added thing that we're asking staff to be objective about. And some of them have difficulty with that. But if there's someone who is coming to terms with their sexuality, there's someone I'm working with right now, and I'm suggesting that they find a support group for LGBT people and go. We had people come to the group that I facilitated that were in the system. They would come with a staff person who would sit in the other room, and it was great. It was always a positive experience. But there are lots of groups around. I mean, there could even be like a gay bird watching club or something. I mean, there's all kinds of cross system things too. But it's putting the effort in to look for them. And I think you're right. The staff is so, well, just put a little more effort in over here, put a little effort in over there, and they're already kind of burning out.
Yeah, 500 pages of documentation every day, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
But I think if there were more social groups, that would be, after we did Safer Options, the Training Institute for people with problematic sexual behavior or sex offenders, at the end of that, we had 5 or 6 groups all around the state that would meet once a month, and different agencies would bring different people and they would all get together and talk. And it was so great because somebody, one of the guys might say, or somebody would say, you walked home from work the other day and you cut through this neighborhood, and the guy would say, yeah, well, I was tired, it's a shorter way, but it was where the offense had taken place, like a year or two before. And another guy in the group would say, don't even go there, like they held each other accountable, and
Yeah.
there was some laughter too. But that was terrific. And I don't know of any groups like that between agencies that are talking about stuff and relationships. And I mean, I loved the thing I did in California because it was, even the educational part talking about sexuality, was, we had fun doing that. And we had some laughter and lots of questions. And sometimes they'd ask questions that they think they were going to catch me with, or something. And I just answer the question, whatever. But then they had fun immediately. Well, we had fun from the beginning to the end. And part of it was educational, and part of it was just dancing around and laughing and having fun. But there were probably 15, 16 people in that group. And that was a nice mix from different agencies. It was really cool.
Well, we do want to pull you in to consider you working with me once a month doing just a dating and relationship group. Now, the problem is that we do use Zoom because we're pulling people from all over the place, but we have to start somewhere with providing some opportunity for people. And then
Yeah.
we do like monthly in-person meetup groups where it's a social piece. So they're coming together and they're doing things like we've done cookouts, we've done Dave and Buster's, we've done going to the movies where we can
Yeah.
get people together and just do something fun, because what we're trying to teach them through these different groups that we've done and we're going to continue to do, we want to see that they're actually using them with each other then too.
Yeah, I have a friend who is, you probably know him, but yeah, he lives in the Philadelphia area. He's a real character, and he's in the system. And he'll often say, I'm flying here. I'm going to speak. I'm flying out there, and I'm going to take a bus over here, and I'm running this group over there. And then he'll say, well, they got me in the system. I might as well use what they're what they're giving me. But he said once, it's one of the hard things about dating is, if there was somebody I was dating and I wanted to go out to dinner, I'd have to, we'd have to have the agency van come and go pick her up. And, he said, that just isn't what I want to be doing, and that's, he lives with his mom. He lives independently and comes and goes. But yeah, I mean, he probably could be driving a car, actually.
He meets women and women are attracted to him. They like him, like they just are drawn to him. And
Yeah.
I talked with him on Monday. Well, what's it like to bring a woman back to your place? He's like, it's weird because it's a group home and he has a housemate who is autistic. He's non-speaking. He's making a lot of noise, flapping around. But this is what I love about this guy. He said, I gauge the woman to see how they treat him
Oh,
as whether
wow.
or not they're good people or not. He's like, so I kind of want them to come here to see how they respond, so I know whether or not she's a decent human being. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
who are you and where did you come from?
That's awesome. That is awesome.
But that would be hard. That would be uncomfortable. I mean, it's like, I don't know, bringing a girl back to your parents' house and
I
wanting
know.
to do something, but your parents are right there in the next room. It's weird, you know?
It is weird. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that though. That's one that's so deep, really. It's like a real, I don't know, it makes me almost teary to think about that gentleman and with that thought process. That's sort of like my friend. He's, because he'll call me sometimes. He was engaged at one point, but he didn't have enough experience with relationships that he could say, okay, I asked her to marry me. I got down, I did what I was supposed to do. I got down on one knee and he gave her a ring. But then he didn't know, he thought maybe everything would just kind of happen over where she was, but nothing did, because she wasn't getting what he was getting. They were on two kind of different planes. And he would call me and say, "Is this a normal thing? Like we should be setting a date, right?" Or I mean, but he didn't know how to do any of that, and it ended up not working out. But he didn't know what to do. I mean, he knew something should be happening, but he didn't know what it was. And then she was asking him for money, and it just seemed like he got to the point where he said, I think maybe I'm being taken advantage of, and I don't think this is what love is, sort of.
Sounds familiar, dude. Yes. And love is blind, isn't it? We do have sort of these expectations we follow. So you ask a woman to marry you, she says yes, and then you start thinking, well, shouldn't you start some planning? Like, shouldn't the relationship move to something else? But we become blind to sort of the red flags that are just coming up in the relationship too. And that's
Yeah.
a really hard thing to accept.
In any relationship for any of us, it absolutely is. When you meet someone, you think, "Oh, this is so good. This is what I've been looking for, my whole life," or whatever. But when you don't have the experience of being in school and having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and you break up, and then you have another one, and then you're dishonest with them, and then you regret it. Not having all that, which most of the people we work with don't. And in addition to that, so many of them have been taken advantage of sexually. The rate of abuse is so high. What is their line different than our line? I think it is in many cases. Someone can say, I'm your friend, right? I just want to rub your back a little bit, or whatever it might be. And so many people touch them physically that the boundaries are just blurred all over the place. And they're somewhat dependent, obviously, because they're in the system. So they tend to take more than any of us would. I mean, if someone kept touching me, at some point I just say, "Do not touch me again." And I'm a touchy person, but if somebody was just doing something that made me uncomfortable, I would tell them. I mean, like, don't do that. Not you're underestimating my strength.
Just listening to, because I just always listen to you and things pop into my head, just hearing about opportunities, and I think it was similar growing up and as someone who identified as different, LGBT, there aren't opportunities. So I think you're looking for who's paying you attention, but who's showing you some form of love and affection too. And that becomes an overwhelming feeling because you don't have the same opportunities as you see other people around you, where
Exactly.
you can just ask someone out and they accept, and you're dating and you're doing all these, going to prom and doing all these things. It didn't exist. So the first person that comes along that really does show an interest, it's easy to get sucked into that feeling of love.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's manipulation.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I remember again in California, I went into an agency, and this man opened the door and let me in, and I said, "Hi," and he said, "I'm John," or whatever his name was, and I was there to see a client, and I said, "Is the whatever, I don't know what the name was, I can't remember. Is he here?" And he said, "Well, I'm John." I thought he was staff. One of the most capable people I ever met anywhere. I mean, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he was doing in the system. But I mean, it would have been awfully easy for him to take advantage of someone. He was charming. And I don't think he did. I'm not saying that, but just so sweet and kind, and kind of get you some tea, and would you like to sit here? Do you want to go? My bedroom's private, whatever. And yeah, it's so easy to take advantage of people. It's so easy to take advantage of anybody, but the people in our system that need more, and trust more. I know I've met this example, the little boxes that I use, that a person and a place and an action. And I was working with a woman. I would see her at her home, and we'd meet in her bedroom. There was a desk along one wall, and I flipped the little boxes, and what came up was, if I'm working directly, my name is on the name box, so it said Sharon asked me to take my clothes off in my bedroom. And she said, "That's a hard one." I was like, "Oh my God, what have I been doing all these weeks?" But I said, "Well, tell me more. Tell me about that. Why is that a hard one?" And she said, "Because I trust you." It's that simple. She would have taken her clothes off. And I said, "Well, let's talk about that. Let's, why it's not, because we don't have that kind of, I'm not a doctor, you're not hurt somewhere, and there's no reason for me to do that, and we don't have a romantic, all of that stuff. But she willingly would have, because I mean, I got her through some really tough stuff and she really trusted me. Part of it was that what I helped get her through was she had been in a consensual relationship with a man, and it wasn't going well. He wanted her to do things, she didn't want to do them. She was uncomfortable and he kept pressuring her and pressuring her. What kind of friend is this that for you? And I helped her through that whole thing. So then of course she trusted me.
While there may not be a concern whatsoever in terms of what they would do or not do to the person, like I would trust you with my life. The concern is teaching people what's absolutely essential, because there are lots of people in this world who you can't trust. And you
Yeah.
have to be mindful of that. Walking into day programs, it's a joke, but it's not funny. I walk into day programs and people will come up to me left and right, women hugging me. Oh, I love you. I've missed you so much.
Yeah.
Never met you. I
Yeah.
could be someone in the sex trafficking industry. You didn't even check my ID at the door. Like I could really hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's very sad to me that it happens all the time, that people get hurt, and sometimes it's someone else in the system taking advantage of them, a colleague of sorts, and sometimes it's staff, or sometimes it's a neighbor, but it's just so easy unless we step in and give people the information they need to be safe and to understand all of this complicated stuff. I mean, it's hard for anybody. I think about, having had a whole bunch of teenagers, but he said he really liked me, and that kind, well, or someone will say, I have a girlfriend or I have a boyfriend. I say, oh, that's nice. What's their name? Well, I don't know yet. They're in and it's because they want it to be. But we've got to continue to help people and do the best we can.
Relationships. I mean, it's something that people just naturally long for.
Yeah,
That sense of love, that sense of belonging, that sense of security and safety. But we have to know what each of our boundaries are too. I will
exactly.
not date a married woman. That's a boundary that I have established and I won't break it. So we
Yeah,
have to be clear on what boundaries exist and talk about them so that people can make good decisions in their life moving forward. It's important.
exactly. There's a lot to do around this area, I dare say. I just wish we had more people that we could help to do it, because they don't know if they should. I don't know, like, and I know you've had this experience too. An agency will call and they say, well, you'll get there. And sometimes it's some kind of simple. And I'll say, well, what about this? What about to the staff? And they'll say, well, oh, I didn't know that was there, or I didn't know I could do that, or I didn't know that was so personal. I didn't know I should talk about that. Well, yeah, you may be the only one that can in that moment, and that moment is now gone. So, but we need to help the staff they're not doing it for money, for sure, as you said. They're doing it because they care about people, and that's why we're doing it too.
But we have 600 active listeners now in 8 countries.
Oh
So
my gosh.
our tiny little podcast is making a dent. It's making a difference. And that's the commitment that we made. So we have to keep challenging folks in the system, whether it's through trainings, whether it's through education, whether it's through suggesting to listen to something,
Yeah,
because just a piece of information can change the way people see things, they view things, and they do things. And that's
yeah,
how the change sparks.
exactly. And what, there's bound to be people in that, 600 whatever people that are doing some really great things, and it would be wonderful to know what they're doing and to be able to, share that as well.
Make sure you contact us because we do want to hear from other people. We do want to hear about the good things and the good resources that other people are doing and be a part of this, because it's not about two old sexperts. It's about the other sexperts that are out there doing things
Exactly.
that even we don't know about,
We're here to learn and pass it on, for sure.
because no one's an expert in anything. If you think you're an expert, it means you're closed to learning. new things, and we all have learning.
Oh, that's a good point. Never too old to stop learning.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Two Old Sexperts. We'll be on a brief leave, and we'll see you back in about a month as Sharon and I talk with you about basic sex education and the difference between supporting children and adults.